That voice didn't belong in the lobby. It didn't come from the front desk or any of the executives rushing past in tailored suits. It was sharp, warm, and precise, like a silver blade, spoken in flawless Mandarin. Mason Lattimore, CEO of Langston Cross Global, had just stepped out of the elevator when it hit him like a punch to the chest. He turned. The person speaking wasn't a translator, wasn't a global project lead. She was a black woman in a burgundy janitor's uniform, hair braided neatly, standing near the touchscreen building directory, a custodian, and his world tilted because of a language he never expected to hear from her. Comment 1 if you didn't see that coming. And trust us, this is only the beginning. Atlanta, 8:13 a.m. Langston Cross Global buzzed with the sounds of heels on marble, fingers tapping on glass, espresso machines hissing, and lemon-scented floor polish. The main lobby, where the CEO passed through daily without stopping for anyone. Overhead, cold white LEDs. Underfoot, imported granite. And in the midst of the rush, Imani Brooks, the overnight janitor, had just finished her shift and was guiding an international guest in his native tongue. No one noticed her, not out of cruelty, just habit. They were used to uniforms blending into the walls. Existing, not acknowledged. Imani Brooks, 40 years old. Balanced frame, deep brown skin, tightly braided hair tied at the nape of her neck, eyes steady. 13 years of silent labor at Langston Cross. Never missed a shift, never made noise, never complained about overtime. They called her the janitor lady. No one ever asked, "What's your name?" Inside her worn backpack weren't just gloves and glass cleaner. There were German textbooks, Arabic vocab charts, and Portuguese flashcards. She didn't talk much, because no one asked. But today, her first answer, delivered in Mandarin, made an entire building lift its head. Mason slowed his pace. The closer he got, the harder his heart pounded. Not from anger, but from that quiet discomfort of realizing you've overlooked something vital in your own house. She had just spoken to an elderly visitor in Mandarin. Now she was switching to Spanish for a delivery worker, then French, smoothly and accurately, for a vendor looking for the wrong meeting room. He had spent millions on cultural training, hired entire translation teams, and yet the most gifted linguist in the building was mopping floors beneath his feet. "Excuse me," Mason said. Imani turned, slightly startled but composed. "Yes, sir." "That was Mandarin, wasn't it?" "Yes, sir." "And French? Spanish?" She nodded. "Anything else?" Her tone remained flat. "Portuguese, German, Arabic, Italian, Swahili, and I can read Latin." He froze. 9. She had just listed 9 languages like they were yesterday's cleaning checklist. No arrogance, no drama, just truth, straight as a level beam. "Do you have a few minutes?" Mason asked. Imani looked up, her eyes flickered, confused. "Now?" "Yes, I'd like to speak with you in my office." In that moment, time paused for her. She had never been to the executive floor, not because she wasn't capable, but because no one ever imagined she should. "All right." One word, soft as air, but in Mason's mind it was the sound of a lock finally clicking open on a long-closed door. In the elevator, neither of them spoke. Then Imani broke the silence. "I've worked here 13 years." He turned toward her. "And I never thought I'd be invited to the 18th floor." When they entered the sunlit office lined with glass, she didn't tremble. She simply looked, once, around the room, committing every detail to memory. "Where did you learn those languages?" "At home, in libraries, in hospital hallways while caring for my mother, in supply rooms between shifts. I studied because it's the only thing that still made me feel like I existed." Mason looked at her, didn't say much, just opened his notebook and began to write. An idea was forming, not about a janitor who speaks languages, but about everyone who's been ignored because they don't have an office door with their name on it. A story had just begun, and Langston Cross Global was about to witness something it had never seen before. This time, no one could pretend not to notice. Do you speak Portuguese? Imani Brooks had just finished stacking clean towels when the question came, from the same man who had invited her to the executive floor the day before. CEO Mason Lattimore stood at the doorway of the basement janitor's room holding a file, eyes tense. What's going on, sir? Our translator just canceled last minute. A delegation from Sao Paulo is waiting upstairs. She nodded calmly. I can do it. Mason gave a small smile, not out of pity, but the kind of relief you feel when you've finally found the right key to the right lock. Comment 1 if you believe some of the most powerful decisions are made in places no one expects, like a basement hallway. Langston Cross Global was hosting a high-level meeting with strategic partners from Brazil. Conference room 4C, 19th floor. 4 executives in pale suits spoke quietly in their native tongue, eyes glancing around, clearly uncomfortable. No one could quite follow them. It wasn't just the language barrier, it was the cultural gap, the kind that turns handshakes stiff and conversations shallow. Mason walked in with Imani at his side. She wore no suit, no name badge, just gave a simple nod and said, Bom dia, sejam bem-vindos. And in an instant, the room transformed. Imani entered like she had done this a dozen times. She didn't overcompensate, didn't fake confidence. She simply stood with grounded stillness, the kind of presence that doesn't need permission, just recognition. The Brazilian partners were startled for a second, then smiled. She didn't just translate words, she translated atmosphere, body language, even silence. One of them cracked a joke, and Imani responded with a local Portuguese punchline that sent the entire room laughing. She had never been trained for this room, but no one in it believed she didn't belong. Outside the meeting room, a few employees watched through the glass, whispering, Isn't that the janitor? The CEO is using her as a translator? Another voice, colder, Why not call someone from the language team? Mason didn't hear it, but he felt the undercurrent, and Imani? She knew those looks. She'd seen them in hospital corridors when her mother was sick, in supermarkets during night shifts, in office hallways as she rolled cleaning carts past glass doors. The kind of looks that saw only a uniform, never the person inside it. After the meeting, one of the Brazilian executives turned to Mason and said in perfect English, She's better than anyone we've worked with this year. Where did you find her? Mason smiled. Right here. Imani left the room carrying a tray of coffee cups. No one asked her to clean, but it was habit, leaving spaces spotless, both physically and emotionally. She wasn't looking for compliments. She didn't seek the spotlight. But everyone in that room saw her, and none of them could pretend she was just the janitor anymore. Have you ever worked as a professional interpreter? Mason asked as they walked back to the service floor. Imani shook her head. Just helped folks in hospitals, government offices, schools, never had a certificate. And your daughter? She's a nurse in Tempe now, paid her way through school, stubborn like her mama. They both laughed, no longer CEO and custodian, but 2 people who had once juggled 3 jobs just to pay rent. Mason hesitated. I'm thinking of creating a new position, one we've never had before. She tilted her head. What role? Cultural liaison, someone who bridges international teams, interprets language and context, and understands people in ways software never will. You're more qualified than many on our leadership team, Mason said. You proved that at 8:15 this morning. Imani met his gaze. Director, this is real? As real as every brick in this building. I don't have a college degree. You have something more valuable, lived experience, relentless commitment, fluency in 9 languages, and a heart that never gave up. She didn't answer right away. She just stood there, hand resting on her backpack strap, silently weighing whether she could carry one more role. Finally, she gave a soft nod. All right, I'll try. Mason extended his hand. Imani shook it. No hesitation, no lowered eyes. In the warm hallway light of the 18th floor, that handshake wasn't just a promotion, it was a shift, one that would ripple down to the lowest sublevel. Tomorrow, when she walked back in, there'd be more eyes on her. Some would doubt, some would admire, some would resent, but tonight she'd still wear the same rubber-soled shoes, still walk the same hallway. The only difference was, she had been seen, and no one could pretend to be blind anymore. A janitor with a management office? You've got to be kidding. The voice snapped through the break room on the 12th floor. Two young marketing associates huddled over their salad containers, whispering, "I heard the CEO brought her up himself." At this rate, people are going to think she's some kind of government spy. Laughter mixed with the sound of soda cans cracking open and keyboards tapping. On Slack, on stairwells, in elevators, the story of Imani Brooks being appointed as cultural liaison spread like wildfire. Not through official email, but in the oldest language of all, doubt and prejudice. Comment 1 if you know that silent resistance is often the most dangerous kind of power. Imani's new office on the 12th floor wasn't large, just a desk, a computer, a small plant by the window, and a brushed steel nameplate. Imani Brooks, Cultural Liaison, International Affairs. But to her, it felt like another planet. The wooden floors didn't smell like bleach. No one rolled mop buckets past the door. No one tapped her shoulder to ask, "Is there more toilet paper?" Imani stood in the room. She didn't sit right away. She reached out and touched the nameplate, not to confirm it was real, but to memorize the feeling of being called by her name, after 13 years of being called ma'am. Tobias Quinn walked in, Director of International Affairs, 42, rimless glasses, a white shirt pressed so clean it could cut, polite enough not to get sued, cold enough to make it clear you weren't welcome. "You're the new hire?" His voice was flat, like reading policy aloud. Imani looked up. "That's what I've been told." He didn't smile. "I've got files from Italy, a vendor issue in Dubai, and the Brazil meeting last week still needs cleanup." He dropped a stack of folders on her desk, not loud, but just hard enough for the dust to lift. "Think you can handle that?" Imani replied calmly. "I'll need a few hours to review, then yes." Tobias raised an eyebrow and walked out. No goodbye. Just performance. Just pressure. Imani knew that look. It wasn't questioning her skills, it was questioning her right to be here. A high-floor office, a gleaming nameplate, a title that didn't require an Ivy League degree. On the internal network, quiet emails circulated. "Please review our promotion protocol." Are we trading expertise for image? No one used her name, but every line was about her. Imani didn't respond. She just buried herself in the files Tobias left. Reading, marking, translating terminology in French and Arabic, recording every note, ready to respond in the one way they couldn't deny. Results. 4 days later, Tobias returned. Imani had already rewritten 3 contract drafts, untangled issues with the Italian deal, and corrected language discrepancies in the Dubai agreement. No boasting, no complaints. She simply placed the finished files neatly on Tobias's desk, with an email containing her notes. He skimmed through them, said nothing, just let out a short, and walked away. No, thank you. But the next day, the Brazil contract reached legal, tagged with reviewed by cultural liaison, verified for language and compliance. As her name started appearing in more internal threads, Imani opened her top drawer. Inside was her old ID, janitor number 1982, night shift. She stared at it for a long moment, then placed it gently inside a velvet-lined box, not to keep as a memory, but as a reminder. There was a time when her footsteps couldn't echo across the lobby carpet. Now people were listening, but that didn't mean they were ready to accept her. Not yet. On the whiteboard outside her office, someone wrote in dry erase marker, "We see you." No signature, no decoration, just 3 words. But they tightened her throat. Someone, maybe an intern, maybe a night shift employee, had just said what the entire system tried to pretend wasn't true. She was no longer a shadow. She was light, faint, but undeniable. Imani didn't erase the message. She simply added, in black marker underneath, "I see you too." The following week, CEO Mason Lattimore walked past her office and gave a subtle nod. Voice Inside, the name for a new internal development initiative, was mentioned during the leadership meeting. An unofficial idea, a seed, not yet planted. But Imani had already started sketching out the blueprint in her head, because she knew there were dozens more like her, people who had never been invited into this room. And if no one was going to pull up a chair for them, she'd be the one to bring the first one in. Looks like we skipped a few basic steps in the hiring process. The voice cut through the cold air of the 17th floor boardroom like a blade. Imani Brooks sat on one side of the table, hands resting lightly on her lap, unshaken. Across from her sat Eleanor Shaw, senior board member, notoriously exacting, immune to sentiment. On the table lay a folder stamped in bold, "Brooks Imani, personnel file, unofficial appointment." Eleanor didn't look up. "You were a janitor, correct?" Imani nodded. "Fascinating. Comment 1 if you want to know whether Imani is about to do the impossible in this power chamber." The 17th floor boardroom was where multi-million-dollar decisions were signed. Italian leather chairs, gray velvet curtains. Every detail designed to do one thing: make outsiders feel small. Imani didn't shrink. She didn't inflate either. She simply sat upright, gaze steady. She had cleaned this room before, wiped these armrests, heard fragments of meetings through half-closed doors. But today she wasn't here to clean. She was here to answer. Eleanor Shaw, 62 years old, gray blazer, silver hair in a tight bun, ebony pin in place. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone without an Ivy League degree or a last name recognized in finance. She didn't ask, "How are you?" Didn't offer water. She just asked, "You think you're qualified to represent this company in international negotiations?" Imani replied, voice low and even. "I think I've already done that, before anyone gave me the title." Eleanor blinked. She hadn't expected an answer so swift, so airtight. "Do you have a college degree?" "No." "Translation certification?" "No." "International management?" "Also no." Eleanor closed the file. "Then why do you think you deserve this position?" Imani didn't flinch, didn't argue. She spoke slowly. "I don't think I was chosen because I deserved it. I think I proved I was effective, even when no one thought to ask me first." And for a moment, the room felt smaller for Eleanor. For the first time in the exchange, she had no immediate comeback. Imani reached into her bag and pulled out 3 documents. "This is the vendor contract from Sao Paulo, delayed 6 weeks before I stepped in. This is the Morocco agreement, now finalized by legal. And this is the Dubai correction, wrong since 2019. It cost the company over $80,000. Eleanor flipped through them. Imani didn't elaborate. The paper spoke loud enough. "Do you believe companies should run on instinct and personal judgment?" Eleanor asked. Imani tilted her head and gave a soft smile. "No, ma'am, I believe companies should run on results." Eleanor stood, slowly. She closed the file and turned to face the window overlooking the city. "You're a gamble," she said, her voice not as firm as before. Imani rose, facing her. "I've lived my life on gambles, ma'am. Raised a daughter without a father. Cared for a mother with cancer on a minimum wage salary. I bet everything I had on silence, and now, for the first time, I get to speak." Eleanor turned back. Her eyes no longer held contempt, just evaluation. Imani had just passed a test that wasn't listed on any payroll system. "You know what people like me fear the most?" Eleanor asked. Imani replied, "Being replaced." Eleanor pressed her lips together, then sat down. "Number. Being proven that we've overlooked someone for far too long." It wasn't a surrender, just an acknowledgement, silent but undeniable. Some things were now out of her control. Imani didn't need an apology. She just needed the space to keep doing the work she was built to do. Imani left the boardroom, not hurried, didn't slam the door. She stepped into the elevator, pulled out her phone, and dialed a familiar number. Hey, Mama? A small smile broke across her face, soft as an exhale after a storm. I'm okay. Just needed to hear your voice. They chatted for a few minutes. Nothing urgent, laundry, the neighbor's dog. But Imani knew, after everything, what kept her grounded wasn't the nameplate outside her office. It was the reason she started. So no one like her would have to live unheard ever again. We need to build better internal talent development. Imani Brooks heard her name spoken aloud in a senior leadership meeting, not as a problem, but as proof. She doesn't just handle contracts, one director said. She's reshaped how we think. At the head of the table, CEO Mason Lattimore looked her way and gave a subtle nod. What do we call this? She answered slowly, voice inside. The room went silent, not out of doubt, but because everyone knew if this became real, a lot of unheard voices were about to be amplified. Comment 1 if you've ever seen a quiet person become the loudest voice in the room. Langston Cross had started talking about untapped internal strength. Brainstorming sessions popped up, but no one understood the overlooked better than Imani, because she used to eat alone in the basement cafeteria, used to borrow German textbooks from the public library, and study between cleaning shifts. Now she moved from department to department, IT, warehouse staff, building security, asking, what would you learn if you had the chance? No one said no, because they knew she wasn't just asking, she was speaking for them. Bao Tran, 22nd Vietnamese intern, small frame, soft-spoken, ate lunch alone, avoided eye contact. Imani noticed him the first week. One day she passed the training room and saw him rehearsing a presentation. To no one. Need feedback? She asked. He blushed, nodded. After that, he started asking her to review his slides, fix phrasing, and eventually share things beyond his job description. One day, Bao asked, how did you learn 9 languages? She answered without pause. 1 word at a time. Same way you're learning how to stand, 1 second at a time. Not everyone liked voice inside. Some managers questioned it behind closed doors. Who's overseeing it? Who ensures quality? An anonymous email to HR read, are we training or doing PR? Imani didn't respond with debate. She responded with structure, evening classes, soft skills and language lessons, mentors who once were ignored. She brought in a night shift cook to teach beginner Spanish, a retired security guard to train in emergency coordination, all hosted in a repurposed space, now named the Atwater Room. After the first training session, Imani stayed behind. She watched interns and maintenance workers exchanging French phrases. Bao stood to thank her. An older custodian squeezed her hand, eyes misty. You're the reason I still come to work, even if no one calls my name. Imani didn't respond. She just smiled and wrote in her notebook. Don't just teach. Make them believe they're worth learning. Mason entered quietly, standing in the doorway. Imani turned. See what I meant? She asked. He nodded. And I think we should scale this. A month later, Imani was invited to speak at the Eastern Logistics Leadership Conference. She didn't deliver an eloquent keynote, no famous quotes. She stood there, wearing a light beige blazer, note cards in hand, and said, I was never just a janitor. I speak 9 languages, but no one ever asked. I don't need favors. I need opportunities to prove myself. The room was dead silent. Then people stood, one by one. The applause rolled like thunder. For the first time, a voice from the margins filled the center, and no one dared interrupt it. After the conference, a young man approached, eyes wet. My mom's a laundry worker. She speaks 5 languages. I used to be ashamed of that, but today, I'm proud. Imani held his hand. Don't ever let anyone shame you for where you begin. The only shame is not seeing the brilliance right in front of you. Back at her office, she found a small envelope on her desk. Inside was a handwritten note. You reminded me that I matter. No name, no need. Voice Inside became Langston Cross's national internal program. Imani was named head of the rollout team, but she still walked to work each day, still kept her old janitor badge in her wallet, not to remember who she was, but so no one forgets that value wears no uniform. That night, she passed through the third-floor hallway, the one she used to mop, tile by tile. On the wall, someone had taped a yellow sticky note. Talent speaks softly until it's finally heard. She has no degree, no certifications, and now she's leading a training program? The words weren't spoken in the boardroom. They were whispered behind her back, sent through internal messages, muttered over private Zoom calls between a few legacy directors and a board member. An anonymous email landed in HR with a single sentence: "Who is she to represent us globally?" No signature, none needed. In corporate systems, sabotage doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it just changes the wind. And around the name Imani Brooks, the wind was shifting. Comment 1: if you know real power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers with precision. Langston Cross Global moved as usual that morning. Espressos brewed, Slack messages pinged, presentations got approval. But on the 21st floor, where the strategic board met, Imani's name was no longer spoken with warmth. A few side glances, a few clipped laughs. She's becoming a symbol we can't control. People notice her more than company policy. What was once internal pride had now been branded a risky pilot. No one opposed her outright. They didn't need to. They just raised questions. Eleanor Shaw was back. No advance notice, no polite greeting, just one email. Imani Brooks requested, urgent priority, 17th floor. Imani knew the undercurrent was rising, and they were sending the same hand that once tried to quiet her. Eleanor hadn't changed. Same silver hair, same gray suit, same blade-sharp stare. But this time, she didn't start with a question. She dropped a thick stack of paper. "These are the partners you're managing. I want to know exactly how many of them you're truly qualified to handle." Eleanor began reading aloud. No degree, no management coursework, no formal international experience. "I have results," Imani said. "Prove it," Eleanor replied. Imani paused, not from fear, but because she knew this time words wouldn't be enough. This wasn't about assessment. It was about pressure. Sometimes, systems don't eliminate you directly. They exhaust you until you walk away. That's what this was. Imani reached into her bag. She pulled out a set of folders, highlighted lines, corrected terms, translated clauses vetted across 4 quality control systems. "This is the Morocco contract. Language errors delayed it 3 months until I stepped in. This is the Italy agreement. I realigned timelines and supplemental clauses. And this is feedback from our Brazil partners. They signed because someone finally spoke to them in their native language." Eleanor flipped through slowly, didn't say a word. Imani stared directly at her. "You don't have to like me," she said, "but you can't deny my results." Eleanor shut the folders. "I'm not sure I trust you." Imani stepped forward. "You don't need to. Who do you think you are to speak like this?" Imani didn't blink. "I'm the person you didn't see for 13 years. The one who cleaned your boardroom floor while you signed off on executive hires. The one you ignored because I didn't wear a suit, but who saved 3 contracts you never read carefully." She tilted her head. "And now I'm the one who answers when you ask the wrong question." Eleanor rose, didn't say goodbye, just took the folders and left the room. The door shut, not loud but definitive. Imani sat back down, exhaled, not out of fear, out of fatigue. Doing the right thing once wasn't enough. You had to do it again. And again. Prove yourself daily as if each day were your first chance to be believed. She opened her laptop and typed, "I'm ready to join the planning meeting for the national expansion of Voice Inside." The next day, Imani stepped into the 12th floor elevator. 3 others were already inside, all silent. No one checked their phone. Then, one voice, soft, not turning around. "We heard what happened." Imani didn't respond, but when the doors opened, she turned back. "Don't listen to the rumors. Look at the results." The doors closed. Imani returned to her desk. On the whiteboard, someone had written a new line. "You can't silence someone who learned to speak through action. I was never just a janitor. I speak 9 languages, and I'm the only one who's ever sat on both sides of a locked door." Imani stood before a crowd of over 300 at the Eastern Supply Chain Leadership Conference. No PowerPoint, no sponsor backing her, just the story of a Black woman who had once been treated like part of the floor. But today, that very floor was lifting others higher. The room was silent. Then, it erupted. The speech ended, but its echo had only just begun. Comment 1 if you've ever seen someone dismissed become the one who leads. The ballroom was located at Cincinnati's largest convention center, a space once reserved for speakers with MBAs, polished resumes, and gold-trimmed business cards. Imani wore a soft beige blazer, hair braided neatly, eyes steady and unseeking. She wasn't there to be celebrated. She was there to remind them. Not everyone with a microphone has something worth hearing, and not everyone cleaning the stage lacks a lesson powerful enough to rewrite your system. Eyes shifted, not out of admiration, but awakening. After her speech, a young man approached, eyes red. "Ms. Brooks." His voice trembled. "My mom's a hotel housekeeper. She speaks 5 languages. I used to be ashamed of that. But not today." Imani gently touched his shoulder. "Never let anyone shame you for where you begin. The only shame is in failing to see the light, just because it doesn't wear leather shoes." He didn't say more. He hugged her, quick, tight, then slipped away. But that moment rippled, far beyond the stage. Eleanor Shaw moved toward Imani from the back of the room. No microphone, no smile. "You've made yourself a symbol, which means you'll now be watched." Imani didn't flinch. "For telling the truth?" Eleanor shook her head. "For making others feel small, even if you didn't mean to." Imani answered, voice soft but solid. "I didn't come to make anyone feel small. I came so people like me would know we're allowed to grow without asking for permission." Back at the office, Imani opened an email from Mason. "Voice inside is going national. You're in charge." She didn't reply right away. Instead, she opened her desk drawer and took out her old janitor ID, now framed beside her new nameplate. Not for comparison, but as a reminder, you don't have to abandon your past to step into your future. You just can't let others use it to trap you there. She posted a sticky note on her office whiteboard. No permission needed to rise. The following week, the nameplate outside room 4B, used for internal trainings, was quietly replaced. No party, no announcement, just one line etched in black steel. "The Atwater Room." Bao stood in front of it, exhaled. "You think she knows?" An HR staffer nearby replied, "She knows." But she didn't do it for recognition. She did it for the people no one ever called by name. And in that stillness, an entire system redefined itself. Some managers still grumbled. A few whispered emails still made rounds. But when Imani walked into the room, people stood, not out of fear, but because they knew she had become a standard, not by title, but by the quiet, correct decisions made again and again. A new intern whispered, "She doesn't need to raise her voice, because when she speaks, the whole room stops to listen." That is power, not given, earned. Imani stood outside the Atwater room watching new employees file in for orientation. She didn't speak, just stood there for a moment, silently wishing each of them a journey she was never offered. Then she turned, walked back to her office. On her door, someone had taped a handwritten note. "Thank you for bringing your own chair." She smiled, not wide, but real. Because this time, she hadn't just entered a room, she rebuilt the table. and brought extra seats for those once left standing outside. This isn't just a story about a woman who mopped floors and spoke 9 languages. It's a reminder: talent doesn't wear a uniform, and dignity doesn't need a title. Imani Brooks didn't pound on tables. She didn't scream. She didn't need to become someone else to be seen. She stood still and let her results make the noise. If you're a young person of color who's ever been judged by your appearance, ever been left outside the room you had every right to be in, remember this: you are not invisible. You are not alone. And you don't need anyone's permission to rise. And if you hold a position to hire, promote, or uplift, look closer. The most brilliant minds don't always come wrapped in top-tier resumes. They're wiping whiteboards, working late shifts, studying in silence between shifts. They're not shouting, "Notice me." They're simply waiting for you to pause long enough to actually see them. Imani didn't climb into a seat someone else prepared. She brought her own chair and laid down a few more for those who've been left standing far too long. If you've ever felt pushed aside, comment 1. Because this story was written for you, and because the world cannot keep moving forward if it keeps leaving the most powerful voices behind.